we need to keep this guy at Villa Park because he is the one player that I think if he were to leave, you would genuinely you would categorize as irreplaceable. There is not a midfielder on the market that we can go and get.
Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, Aston Villa 4, West Ham 1. What a bloody performance.
Yeah, man. Wow. We are a serious outfit. A serious outfit. I was honestly thinking earlier, like ahead of speaking on this podcast, and was just like, what do we talk about first? How do you break this one down? Like, I've got so much to talk about, like so many different players, like so many different just aspects of like, what an amazing run that we're on. And I just want to sit here and cherish it and savor every tiny little individual detail. But I think if we did that, we'd have like a 6-hour podcast. And I know full well, we've got listeners that would sit through every single minute of those 6 hours and why not because of the run that we're on. But I do have, little conflict of interest to declare before we start because obviously great win for the Villa means it's been a very good week for the Villa Filler FPL League. If you're not in it already, head over there. But number one now in the FPL group is now my girlfriend Chloe.
No way.
And yeah, and so before we get excited about this, I know she's going to be in the other room laughing at me. There's basically my guinea pig team. And I imagine that given that Charlotte is within the top 10 as well, you've kind of got a similar thing going on. And so, yeah, it's kind of extra frustrating for me because I've got currently sat top of the FPL League and I'm in 51st with my actual team.
I have the same thing. I have the exact same thing, mate, as you said. It's frustrating, but also those who know, they know. So, I mean, we can give ourselves a little pat on the back there, mate.
Yeah, I'm a size XL, mate. Just saying.
I've got this show already. I'm just going to give it to you, mate. Just going to give it to you. Actually, no, I want to see Chloe wearing it. That's what I want to see. Yes. We need pictures for the podcast. We'll circle back to FPL at the end of the pod, I think, mate, because it's great, isn't it? But I think we should probably start before we do get into all of this. We were just discussing it off air, mate. There have been some changes to the channel, as I'm sure you guys have seen. Basically, the way that we're going to do things around here going forward, the Villa Filler podcast is always going to be a thing. You guys will always be able to hear Dan and I's full ramblings on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, whichever podcast provider you listen to. But what we're doing is we're going to keep the Villa Filler is going to be on YouTube as well as the post-game reaction, and then the rest of the content that's going to live on the channel is going to be more shortened versions of those podcasts, whether that be in the YouTube Shorts form, vertical video, or as sort of anywhere sub 10-minute long regular YouTube videos that Dan and I are putting a little bit more effort into sort of editing and making look nice. A couple of reasons, really, just sort of general health of the channel. It's been in the shitter recently. It's our own fault. It was the international break. A lot of, Dan and I both lead very busy lives, but, we do the shorts to kind of help the health of the channel. We've sort of been looking at the numbers as well. It's an experiment. We're seeing what we can do. So if you guys were potentially waiting for the podcast, it will always be on Apple and Spotify because those videos are excerpts from the podcast. And you can even watch the podcast in video on Spotify as well if you have that. That goes up in video on there. But just for now, we're trying this out, so we'd appreciate it if you guys stick with us, trying to get better with the thumbnails, that kind of thing as well. I appreciate all of this rambling. The retention has probably gone down, so this is directly contradicting our whole new strategy, but it would be rude of us not to explain what's happening because you guys are probably a little bit surprised to see like 3-minute videos and 5-minute videos make it to the channel this past week. Dan and I are just trying something new. Basically, so as we can try and just get more content to you guys. That is the sort of top and bottom line of it, really. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the changes, and obviously I know a lot of you guys who are listening right now will be listening on Apple and Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and that's great. Nothing's going to change for you guys. This is just for our sort of YouTube audience that we're trying to reinvigorate, because the international break always sucks the life out of us, mate, doesn't it? But that's just the nature of what we do. Now let's talk about this bloody good game of football, because that's what this podcast is all about. I don't know where to start, mate. I don't know where to start. Actually, I do. I want to address a comment on one of the last videos. People were calling us Ollie bashers. Oh my God. I'm sick of having to constantly re-explain our stance on Ollie Watkins. There are so many bloody podcasts where we say how much we love him, but the finishing could be better. And the finishing was bloody brilliant today, mate, wasn't it? That goal that he scored was absolutely phenomenal. It was clinical. We'll get onto that. We'll get onto that. But I think, I posed a question to you, mate, earlier in the preview episode, sorry. How do you go about breaking West Ham down? I think I maybe gave them way more credit than I think they probably deserved. And in the thought of, I thought they'd come to Villa Park and actually want to attack us a little bit more than they did, mate. It seems like all they ever came for was a point, and we get that goal early on, and it almost looked like West Ham didn't necessarily know what to do with themselves, really, didn't it?
It was such a great game, and I think that's the first thing to say. And I think in a way, and I don't want to play down West Ham or make them seem like some kind of Route 1 direct team and everything like that, and really play down what is a very good technical side. And we made a point in the preview of like highlighting that they've got some very good technical players in and amongst the more David Moyes-esque players in the squad. But I think the fact that it was such a good game for the neutral, and at some points it was really end to end. There were points at which kind of I was reflecting on the game afterwards, particularly the 15, maybe 20 minutes after they scored, that maybe 4-1 reflects a little bit harshly on West Ham, because they were very much in this game at points. And right from the word go, I know it was an offside, but Emi makes a really good save from, I think it's a pullback for Jared Bowen from Paqueta. It was offside in the end. But I think the fact that this game was so end-to-end and so frenetic shows that we really made West Ham uncomfortable, because that is not, those aren't words that you use to describe many, if any, West Ham games, really. It was very transitional, and I think we had 10 shots on target within the first half an hour. We just came storming out of the traps, as we really tend to do now at Villa Park. 11 wins in the league at home in a row is absolutely nuts. You can't even, that's ridiculous. And the fact that we're kind of saying that, given where this club was like a year ago, is just beyond belief. But so much of that and so many of those victories have come down to the fact that we get early goals and we start really, really brightly and we catch our opponents off guard. And I think that's kind of the getting early goals and making sure we make teams uncomfortable. It's kind of the backbone of everything we've been doing at Villa Park this season. And today was a prime example of that. This might be the best Villa performance we've seen under Unai Emery, I think. I know we didn't score as many goals as we did in the Brighton game, but there was just something about this game and something about turning over an opposition which we've really struggled against. We haven't beaten West Ham since Tim Sherwood was in the dugout, and look what we did to them today. It was just remarkable, man.
It was. And it feels like so many things that we've not even just sort of like immediately within the past couple of weeks been talking about Villa have sort of happened. Like I was seeing how we just flooded the box, and I'm like, I'm thinking back to this time last year and going, oh my God, we've got midfielders going into the box. We've got Matty Cash getting into the box. We're creating a threat from so many different angles. And that first goal is just absolutely beautiful. I want to shout out Nicolo Zaniolo. I thought he had a really good game. I think it would have gone under the radar how good he actually was in this game. And especially for that pass before the first goal, because that little sort of hooked pass that he managed to sort of chip between, behind the West Ham defender, I think it was Kufal and Zuma, to get that ball to Ollie, who then obviously sets up Douglas Luiz in fantastic fashion. That ball makes that goal. It's so good. It's so cute. And, we've said a few times with Nicolo, he either has too many touches or not enough, right? He either looks to play it off first time or he'll dribble with it for 50 yards and then maybe fumble a pass or whatever. That's fine. I felt he looked so much better today, and I think in general, just the fact, like, you look at him, you highlighted size in the preview, mate. That's something that he has and offers in abundance. Yep. I thought he, in particular, was a real problem for the likes of Ward-Prowse and Alvarez in the space that he was occupying as well. And you've got Diaby obviously on the other side that is, you know, the complete opposite almost. He's way quicker, way more direct, not necessarily looking to be as physical as Nicola, but sort of playing in the space. And I mean, Douglas Luiz, man, we've got to talk about Douglas Luiz. 6 consecutive home goals for Douglas Luiz in the Premier League. This is just outrageous. Like, we're genuinely talking here, and I'm not even, like, this isn't even hyperbole, mate. Douglas Luiz is genuinely one of the best midfielders in the world right now. And there needs to be a serious conversation about this. And I hope, for the love of God, whoever the manager of Brazil is right now, because I'm not actually sure who it is, I hope they're watching this podcast, because I'm really struggling to understand how he's constantly overlooked for the Selecao, mate. We talk about it so much, you know, the wealth of talent that they've got. I'm sorry, he made Paqueta look bang average today. And this is a player we were talking about only 2 or 3 months ago, moving to Manchester City for £100+ million. Douglas Luiz is genuinely a world-class midfielder, and he gets the 2 goals today. He gets the penalty as well. We are witnessing greatness right here. I think it may be too early to say that he's, you know, one of the greatest midfielders to have played for our club, because we've had a lot of very good midfielders walk through the doors, mate. But as of right now, he is playing at a world-class level.
Yeah, he really is. And it's really interesting because he's a player that the casual football fan, and I've kind of had a bit of this, like, living up in Manchester, like, people will, like, you say that you support the Villa, they'll be like, oh, like, who's your best player? Is it Ollie Watkins? Is it Moussa Diaby, like Emi Martinez? And every time I'm like, no, it's probably Douglas Luiz. And he's so kind of underappreciated and undervalued. And I think this Villa team is really, and I think I'm kind of seeing more discourse kind of creep out as a result of this win, really. But there's been not as much chatter, really, about the Villa this season as perhaps there have other teams in and around us. And I'm fine with that. Both of you and I have spoken about in the past how good it is to go under the radar. And I feel like Douglas Luiz's progression totally summarises everything there, in that he is a very under the radar player. And I think he's someone that definitely translates better on the eye when you're in the ground. You don't really get a full sense of exactly what he can do when you're watching on TV. But I mean, yeah, to score in as many games in a row as he has done is just crazy. And there's been such a kind of full circle kind of element to this game, and it kind of harks back to what I was saying in my previous point. But Unai was sacked basically a year ago, almost to the day. I mean, sorry, Gerrard was sacked, Unai was appointed. 20th of October 2022, Villa lost 3-0 at Craven Cottage to Fulham. Steven Gerrard went that very evening. On this day, tomorrow, the 23rd, a year ago, we went and had that massive 4-0 win against Brentford, and the shackles came off, and we've not really looked back since. But for this result to come basically a year on after those events, and then to have Dean Smith in the ground, he was there with Sky, and like the interactions he was having with Ollie and John and everything, it was so heartwarming, and there really was a full circle feel to that game. And I feel that Douglas Luiz's progression from being in a kind of situation in our first season in the Premier League with him or Nakamba, who was going to start in that 6, it was basically a question of who you wanted to not start least. It was like, pick your poison. Neither of those boys really felt like they were cut out for the Premier League at that point. Both had good performances in them, but both definitely had their shortcomings. And how far Douglas Luiz has come since then is just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. And the goals he's adding to his game, he is a serious, serious player. And the decision to tie him down to a contract last summer just feels like with every passing day, a better and better decision, because we need to keep this guy at Villa Park, because he is the one player that I think if he were to leave, you would genuinely, you would categorize as irreplaceable. There is not a midfielder on the market that we can go and get like Douglas Luiz. He's just amazing. And I'm so happy that he's gone and got these goals because he's finally getting the kind of recognition from the wider footballing community that he deserves, I think.
No, absolutely, mate, absolutely. And I mean, Kamara, McGinn, Zaniolo, they all facilitate each other so wonderfully in that midfield. Another just brilliant performance from John McGinn. There was a few instances where he sort of receives the ball on the half turn and just runs with it 30, 40 yards. And I'm just like, yes, like it's nice to see. And maybe I'm looking into this too deep, but when things are so sort of well thought and crafted in how we sort of move the ball about and the sequences of play that Unai Emery likes to develop, it is nice every once in a while to just see John McGinn sort of loosen those shackles and go, do you know what? I'm being John McGinn. I'm going to carry this ball 40 yards. I'm going to wiggle my booty while I'm doing it, and I'm going to have the fans on the edge of their seats. And that's just, you know, that like there's real personality there in the way he plays, and I absolutely love it, mate. I'm lost for words. When you mentioned Dean Smith, that completely threw me off, mate. I was almost in tears at the car when Unai Emery said thank you for everything. That was just, it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And Dino actually, I mean, I was at the game, but from the bits that I've sort of seen on my phone and that, seems to be, you know, pretty decent with the microphone. So Dino, this is an open shout out, mate. If you ever fancy coming on the Villa podcast, we would more than happily have you to chat all things Aston Villa. But I thought you did a great job, and yeah, I mean, it's just, as you say, full circle, mate, full circle. Like, it's nice that it didn't feel like there was a mutual respect between the two of them. It didn't feel condescending or patronising from either side. Dino genuinely looked just filled with joy from what I've seen at how well we're doing, and obviously he's a fan, but you don't really get to see that side from players and managers necessarily all too much in the modern day, mate, do you? So it was really nice to see. I mean, let's talk about the West Ham goal, because I think really, mate, that does actually change the course of this game, because I think after the first goal, I don't want to say we sort of let off, but like West Ham were starting to get themselves back in the game a little bit, and it was always going to be a goal like this, mate. You're going to have to talk me through it, because I don't actually have a perfect recollection of it. Did it take a deflection?
Yeah, a pretty significant one off Pau Torres. It's really, really unlucky. It's probably crept in a eighth of the goal that Emmy just couldn't quite get to. It is really unlucky.
Yeah, I mean, watching it felt like it was happening in slow motion, and that's never a good thing, really. You know, something bad is potentially about to happen. There seemed to be a bit of confusion, but it felt like if West Ham were going to score, that was going to be the means of how they got back in that game. But our response to that, we really did then step it up another level. And I know you said that the 4-1 isn't perhaps a fair reflection of the game, but I think after that, mate, it was actually really difficult for West Ham to sort of get themselves back into it, because we're seeing a much stronger mental side to these Villa players now, mate. There's a resilience that's building. Even perhaps 6 months ago, I think we may have struggled to get back into this game in the way that we did and score the amount of goals that we did. So, you know, when the opportunity presents itself and Ezri wins that penalty for us, is it soft? Perhaps. Have we seen soft penalties given this whole weekend? Absolutely. Thankfully, there was no handball. I mean, there's been a fair few of them in them penalties that have been given this weekend as well, haven't there, mate? But Douglas Luiz steps up, calmly puts that down the middle. And at that point, for me, it didn't necessarily feel like we dominate. Like we just felt like we were in control for so much of this game. So even when we went even when West Ham got their goal back, there was just a level of control that I feel like needs to be talked about, because what Unai Emery's doing is just, it's amazing, and I am genuinely just lost for words for it at the moment. I can't think of the words to describe what I'm thinking of right now, because I genuinely now believe, especially after this, that we can go on and win any game that we play in, with as long as we apply ourselves in the way that we did today.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I think there was a kind of 15, 20 minutes maybe a 15-minute spell after they scored where I thought West Ham looked like they were really pressing. And I think in the wider context of the game, 4-1's probably fair, but they were close to making it 2-2 at points. But it's probably because of that we went and got the final goals, because, as I said, it kind of went back to the stage it was almost in the first half where it was coming end to end and we were dragging them into uncomfortable positions because they were pressing, and rightly so, to get that equalising goal. So it probably kind of swings and roundabouts in that regard, really. But yeah, man, I mean, just what a performance. Leon's goal is just exceptional. But it's, as you say, it's the mentality, man. Like, I put out a tweet and it was like, every other Villa team I've ever seen in my life, which is a good quarter of a century, collapse when that Jarrod Bowen goal goes in, because the mood in the stadium changes. It just feels different. The away end picks up, and all of a sudden, like, they're coming onto you. The opposition just grows, and Villa just have always wilted, I felt, in that kind of situation, and it becomes a matter of not if but when you're going to throw the game away. But this Villa team is just so different. Our heads just don't seem to drop like they have previously. And look, I know a Villa team has probably never been sat fifth, challenging on fourth in the Premier League for as like consistently as we have, but barring the Martin O'Neill days perhaps. But this side and the kind of manager that we have, this is the best manager that we've had in my lifetime, and so it probably goes hand in hand. But yeah, you really can't underestimate what we're doing on the pitch. Is one thing, and I mean that's a whole different kettle of fish to anything we've seen before. But it's what's going on off it, what's going on in the minds of these boys with the lads that are coming off the bench. I mean, Leon's goal is fantastic, and there is just a kind of mindset, and we need to translate it to the European scene, and that's another point for the preview. But domestically right now, we just look untouchable, and you have to look at our kind of fixtures that are coming up next, mate, with the Luton game being our next home game in the Premier League. You've then got Luton, Forest and Fulham before we have a really big game against Spurs on the 26th of November. And if we can keep these games going and keep some points up throughout those three matches, we could be in a really, really exciting position by the time we head to North London on the 26th.
Mate, absolutely, absolutely. And we've got to shout out Tillemans for the assist for that Bailey goal as well. Really good pass. I'm happy for Bailey as well, because, you know, again, like, not to sort of constantly say, but we do really like Leon Bailey on this podcast. Feel like some of the treatment he gets at times, some of the criticism is of course valid, but a goal like that, you could see how much it meant to him. He was absolutely ecstatic, and even at full time, singing "Hi Ho Aston Villa," at the Holte ends. He's just like, he needed that, and it's nice to see that. There's so many. What I would say is there are so many players in the squads where sort of there have been very clearly carved out roles for, specifically, when you look at the 11 as well. And it's good to see that, maybe Bailey isn't going to be the guy that starts every week and scores or assists in every game, but he's now that guy that we can look at to sort of come off the bench, and he's proven himself that he is capable of impacting games when he's doing that. So absolutely buzzing for him on that note. I don't really want to, end the podcast on a sort of poor note, but I thought there was a few poor passes from Powell out at the back. I thought West Ham's press was really good, really concise. They knew exactly who they were targeting, and that was Powell. And it's going to come in with that territory. But thankfully, on another day, maybe we struggle a little bit there, but I think thankfully with them playing Thomas Soucek as almost another full striker, it meant that we sort of got away with the sort of, as I said, the press was good, the press was organised, but I think if you had someone in there who's a bit more mobile, a bit more agile, West Ham probably would have caused us a few more problems. And I think we kind of saw that when Kudus came on, really, didn't we? He looked bright for sort of 10, 15 minutes, was causing Kashi all sorts of trouble down that left-hand side, but he's responsible in giving the ball away for that Ollie Watkins goal, isn't he, mate? What a goal as well, by the way. What a goal. I love nothing more than when strikers hit the roof netting, mate. That is just absolutely phenomenal. And it's really weird because we see this all the time with Ollie. When he slows down, as he did just before the goal, I mean, when any player slows down, you think, what are you doing? Keep running or like shoot or whatever. But it's almost like time freezes for Ollie Watkins, and he sort of took Zuma on the outside, rifled the shot in with, what was it, his left foot. Areola had absolutely no chance on that near post, and it was great. And again, just to reiterate the point at the top of the podcast, we're not Ollie bashers. We just know what he's capable of, and it can be frustrating. And this is what he is capable of. Another brilliant performance by him.
Yeah, man. Only topped by Mo Salah for goal involvements in 2023. It really kind of speaks for himself. And there's an interview that he did after the game with Sky, and they're kind of asking him, like, talk us through the goal. How did you take it? Yada, yada. And he what he said was really quite interesting. He was like, I looked at Zuma and I was kind of seeing what he wanted me to do, and he was kind of showing me towards the touchline onto my left foot, and he was like, okay then. And the kind of way that he said it is like almost like, well, I can go either way, mate. Which way do you want me to go? And he was like, okay, I'll put it on my left, and then just takes out his left and slams it into the roof of the net. There was a real kind of sense that he would have felt comfortable like doing either, and he used the kind of West Ham defense to make his mind up. And it's just, it seems so calculated and everything, and this is what he can do when he's in a rich run of form. And there was that one chance in the first half where he takes a really nice first touch. I can't remember. I think it's Diaby that fizzes the ball kind of into him. Takes a really nice first touch, and on the swivel, kind of dragged it past the post. And you kind of think, it's not going to be one of those days for Ollie, is it? But he got that out of his mind. And considering that, he's not the penalty taker and anything like that, Dougie's obviously got 2 goals today. And I imagine that being a striker, that will be on Ollie Watkins' to-do list, is to get on penalty duties, because as a number 9 that can score goals like he can, if he's on penalties, then it's only 1 goal that's separating him from Mo Salah in terms of goal involvements. And so if he's on penalty duties for the Villa this season, he can end up top of that list, and that's the kind of margins. And so I think that will be kind of what he wants next. But when he's playing like this, there just seems to be no stopping him. And when you look at the kind of opposition that I've just mentioned over the next 2 games, with some European games thrown in, we could be entering one of those purple patches for Ollie Watkins, where he goes and gets 5 or 6 goals in a month. And when he's like playing like that, he's just like unstoppable. And Carroll was saying that if Harry Kane's not fit for the Euros for whatever reason next year, Ollie Watkins is England's number 9, and that mantle is certainly his to lose at the moment.
That's mad, isn't it? That's mad, especially, I mean, the whole recency bias. But there's no Ivan Toney. When Ivan Toney's back, Callum Wilson, it's a tough decision. I think Toney's probably better than Watkins, but I think all round Watkins, his game is better than Toney, but in terms of goal scoring, I don't think we can deny him of that. But I think Carr's probably right there, to be fair. And hopefully we do get to see Ollie in action in Germany, because I mean, we've got to bring football home. It has to happen, even if it is just the Euros. But guys, Dan and I will be back. We will be back. We'll be back in shorter form. We'll be back in longer form, as we mentioned at the top of the podcast. It probably makes sense for us to maybe do the preview tomorrow, given the new strategy. So I'm sure Dan and I will reconvene soon, and there will be plenty more content for you guys hitting the channel. But if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple and Spotify, leave a review, leave a follow, share, all those things really help us on that platform. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.